an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the lives of Christopher Chant. Chapters 11, 12, 13, and 14. In these chapters, Christopher, it turns out, is part of a notorious smuggling ring. But he does not seem to have figured that out yet. He's only just now cottoning on to the fact that his deaths in our world mirror the deaths in the anywhere. Christopher, come on, buddy, keep up. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Huge thanks to Patricia for commissioning this episode. I know that Patricia was having a little trouble for a while there finding any clear spots, and I'm really glad that she was able to get a few of them because I find this book to be like really comfort foody. So I always look forward to covering this. So I am realizing, I actually don't think that I represented my attitude quite as well as I could have in that intro, because it's how I felt initially, and then I sort of started to think about it. I've been really frustrated with certain characters in Diana Wynne Jones books who don't seem to figure out or make connections that I feel are really obvious right away. And of course, there is something to be said for, I am a reader who is experiencing something from the outside looking in, knowing that there is a story heading in a certain direction. So, of course, I'm going to be looking for connections that the character experiencing the thing probably would not look for. But it still has felt like there have been a lot of times where people should have figured some shit out, and they did not. And I have come to realize that that's just sort of the way she likes to play it with the character. These are books that I really like, despite the fact that they are a lot less character-driven than stuff that I usually go for. This is a really plotty. This is something that's got a lot of magical mechanisms and things that just sort of are very convenient for the plot. And the fact that he doesn't know why certain things are happening or think through the connections between them is what keeps the story going for a time. And that's really similar to Kat in the previous book. I won't say that's true of Polly from Fire and Hemlock, because Polly, I feel like they made the connection actually a little sooner than I did in that, simply because it was such an esoteric concept. This is a very clear 1-to-1 ratio of I died in this world and then I died in my world, and the injury was in a very similar spot and caused by something of a similar shape and size, But in Fire and Hemlock, it was a much more sort of conceptual thing. So that was one where I didn't pick up on it right away. But I have been frustrated with the fact that he hasn't seemed to understand that he is having the same sorts of deaths in both, because honestly, we're not talking about the fact that he had the same type of cookies in both worlds. He fucking died in both worlds. He was a medical miracle. He was a complete anomaly. And it just really feels like he should be a little bit more aware than he is of the connection there. But she wants him to not figure things out, to sort of, I think, be so self-absorbed by everything that's going on in his life otherwise that he doesn't take the time to look at what else is going on around him. So, there's the, not only the fact that he hasn't figured out about his lives thing until now, but everybody around him is talking about smuggling things from different worlds and using the series numbers and talking about specific items that are missing, and he still is not getting it. And I just want to slap and shake him. The best explanation for it is really the fact that he is described as sort of being so obstinate because he's so unhappy that even things that he is genuinely interested in, he's affecting that he doesn't care because he's so angry that he doesn't really know any other way to express himself, which leads to this really like sort of saddening relationship between him and his teacher, Mr. Flavian, which we'll get to. But okay, so let me read that part. He starts off like in chapter 11, just absolutely detesting it here. He's being treated like he was when he was in his home originally before going to school. And that's, I think, part of like what's so sad is it'd be really easy to do the thing that Harry Potter does, where this kid is in this like really unhappy home life. He doesn't like his parents or family. They don't seem to care about him. And then he gets plucked up by somebody who knows he can do magic and everything is amazing. But that's not what she does. She has him just live an ordinary life going to school, a school that he actually enjoys, where he has real friends, where he has goals that are related to specific things like that are assigned to that school. She has him, in other words, go from a kind of a terrible, isolated childhood to being able to be an average young dude growing up. And we get to enjoy his learning what it is to have friends. We get to enjoy him being around other people his own age and him realizing that he can relate to them and that he's not like an alien, because it's sort of how it feels like he saw himself. And then she takes it away. Him going and getting taught magic, it's not the solution to his, and I find that to be really fascinating in terms of storytelling, like just subverting tropes that way, but also really cruel. She's giving this character the opportunity to know what he's missing. Because if he had just been plucked up out of home and sent to this guy, he would have no idea. And he'd have just gone his whole life feeling alone in the world. But no, he gets a taste of what it means to actually fit in, to be liked by people, to be admired for doing things well, for his hard work to pay off. Maybe not in magic, but in an ordinary sense, where we get a real look at how him being a regular person would have been enough for him. And I feel like that's something that is attempted by a lot of writers, attempted by a lot of TV shows. We see somebody who's like rejecting their superpower or rejecting their magical ability or rejecting their like involvement in something mysterious and strange because they just want to go back to living an ordinary life. But I don't think that it's often very effective at showing us how much that ordinary life really meant to them to begin with. It makes us see something that's like, as a viewer, because we are here for a book or TV show to be entertained, oftentimes we find their ordinary life really boring and we don't like the fact that this character is resisting so much what's clearly going to be a much more fascinating part of the story. And by sort of like giving us a taste of him being okay, actually, like doing better than average, one could say, in school, she has really pointed out to us in a much more effective way that he was almost there, he almost had it and was able to like really just be a person and live in the world and be okay, and then rips it away and makes it so that this new assignment and this this post of Chrestomanci, which is a foregone conclusion to everybody else. Of course he's going to be Chrestomanci. Of course that's what he's going to, not only what he's going to do, but what he wants to do. Nobody ever seems to have asked him. Even like the Chrestomanci says in response to him being like, I don't want to do this. It's like, oh yeah, everybody says that at first. And it's such an infuriating thing because like, whether that's true or not is irrelevant. It's sort of the kind of thing when you're talking to somebody who's really young and they say something that you remember saying when you were their age and you remember talking about with other people when you look back and you're like, you hear them use the same sort of language or have the same sort of attitude and you want to say, well, you're really young, so that's why you think that. But there's literally no way to say that to somebody without sounding incredibly condescending. I say it anyway because I'm fine with seeming condescending because I can be condescending and that's just me. But there is a dismissiveness there. There is a sort of like, I know you better than you do because I'm older sort of tone that would make anybody bristle, whether you turn out to be right or not. I mean, a ton of people who like tried to tell me shit when I was younger. I'm sure if I was presented with a lot of their little, their pieces of advice today, I'd realize that they were 100% right. But it doesn't help your cause because the person you're trying to get to hear you will automatically tune you out and not listen because of the fact that you are behaving like you know so much more than them. It's just this sort of superiority. And there's no help to be had for it. As you get older, you get perspective that you cannot have as a young person. But expressing that is just, it's tough to do. And it's probably a lot smarter to just not express it and let somebody just make their mistakes, because that's sort of what you have to do in the end anyway, is let a person just go along and like fuck up. But you are just so tempted, right, to try and help somebody else who is clearly about to do the same shit you did. You just don't want them to have to go through what you went through. It's a kindness in its way, even though it comes across as sounding really shitty. It's you like really trying your best to not sit back and watch them fuck up shit for themselves. And that's the part that I really struggle with, is I will see somebody making a mistake and it'll be something like kind of significant, something that will change their life, like staying in a relationship that's bad, or marrying somebody that like has all of these red flags, or deciding to have a kid way too young, or like quitting a job that's obviously just going through a rough patch, or moving across the country when they have no support system. There is all kinds of stuff that I wish I could keep my friends who are younger than me from doing. And I have a significant number now who are younger than me because Owen's younger than me, and I'm pretty much just around all of his friends all the time. So they are aware that I'm older and will kind of low-key ask me for advice, but don't want to actually hear what I have to say, which, like, relatable. Am I wrong? Like, I will frequently ask for advice and then not want to hear that shit. So I'm not mad at them. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. It's just the fact that he is being dismissed and his desire to play cricket is being dismissed the way that it is feels so sort of hurtful to somebody who it was sort of aimless. He finally got something that he felt really passionate about, that he really wanted. And this is the first time ever that we are seeing this from him. And what happens? You know, like, it just gets yanked away. So he's having a really hard time here because he's being isolated. He's like forced to eat meals alone most of the time because they figure that he doesn't want to be around the adults. And he kind of thinks that maybe he does, but then once he does have dinner with them, they all talk without like even acknowledging him, and he may as well not be there anyway. And this is when we hear the talk about the wraiths. And it says the wraith's illegal dragon's blood supply is simply flooding the market now. And then later on, That magic mushroom essence certainly came from 10, but I think the trap we set there stopped that outlet. I'm really curious about that. Like, when they say the trap we set, I'm not sure what that is. Was it the giant hook that came swinging down? Was that what killed him part of a trap? Is the dragon that attacks him later on, is that part of the trap? Are those organized things? I've just been assuming that this is all like, happenstance, that he's just getting a little careless. But the way they're talking about it makes it sound like there was something specifically set up, and I can't think of anything else. So either we haven't come across it yet, or they're trapping the wrong people or something. So I love this line. This was highlighted by 23 people according to Kindle. Christopher sat silent, thinking that if he did get to be the next Chrestomanci, he would forbid people to talk about their work at meal times. Ever. Which I'm pretty sure is exactly the truth when we get to that. Like, they are not allowed to talk about work. That's one of those things that I have really mixed feelings on, because I totally understand wanting to take a break from things and not but also when you're working alone a lot, or when you're working amongst, if you're a teacher, for example, and working amongst kids, you have nobody to vent to all day, and mealtimes feel like the one time to do that. Owen and I, when we hang out and are actually managing to eat a meal together and just talk, which is a rarity, that is practically all we talk about for a while is work. So I guess it's kind of in place here because most of these people seem to live here or close by and are here all the time. So it's just we have to take a break sometimes versus the conversation being the break itself. And Christopher's really having quite a reaction to all of these spells as well, which is something that Kat had experienced too. He doesn't seem as aware that he's experiencing it as Christopher does, because Kat didn't have the sort of access to his ability that Christopher does while he's living here, at least not right away. But Christopher can sense precisely what's happening, that there are misdirection spells on this garden wall, which we know what that's about. That there are spells that sort of muffle there are things that are meant to keep things from getting out of control or for people being able to do dangerous shit. All of this stuff are protective and meant to put strong parameters on the place. And he can sense all of it. And I found this really interesting. It says they would not allow him to be as angry as he felt. They made everything blunt and muffled. In order to express his hatred, Christopher fell back more and more on silent scorn. When people did speak to him, and he had to answer, he was as sarcastic as he knew how to be. So this is a problem because Flavian, who is his tutor, is really trying his best, and Christopher doesn't have time for this guy. Even though outside of this context, he probably would have liked him and gotten along with him and respected him and been able to learn well from him. In this context, he just represents this place that's trying to tell him how to live his life, that's trying to force him to do things that he doesn't care about at the expense of things he does care about. It's just really heartbreaking in a way, because Flavian is he really is so earnest and trying so hard. So yeah, Christopher is saying something about how Flavian has no sense of humor, and he's very gently pushing back and says, "Oh, I don't know. Something in Punch made me smile last week," which I don't know what Punch is, but there's something about this dude and that delivery and the way it's done that makes me feel like Punch is the equivalent of Parade magazine, where it's just a sort of non thing that you can't believe anybody actually reads, or that they would find anything funny because it's so badly done kind of thing. But anyway, he brings up at this point all of the different worlds and the series, and it's the one time that Christopher has sort of perked up and paid attention, because Christopher is obviously very personally invested in these different worlds and learning how they work and where they came from. And poor Flavian starts to get kind of, it's like he's overexcited at the fact that this pupil seems to be really listening and doing well and paying attention, and this sets up an expectation that Christopher is a better student than he is, that winds up getting dashed a little further on. But yeah, they talk about the series. Only one which is just a single world is 11, but we needn't bother with that. All the worlds were probably one world to begin with, and then something happened back in prehistory which could have ended in two contradictory ways. Let's say a continent blew up, or it didn't blow up. The two things couldn't both be true at once in the same world, so that world became two worlds, side by side but quite separate, one with that continent and one without, and so on until there were 12. So then he asks if the series happened the same way. Yes, indeed. Take Series 7, which is a mountain series. In prehistory, the Earth's crust must have buckled many more times than it did here. Or Series 5, where all lands became islands, none of them larger than France. Now these are the same right across the series, but the course of history in each world is different. It's history that makes the differences. The easiest example is our own series, 12, where our world, which we call World A, is oriented on magic, which is normal for most worlds. But the next world, World B, split off in the 14th century and turned to science and machinery. The world beyond that, World C, split off in Roman times and became divided into large empires, and it went on like that up till 9. There are usually 9 to a series. So I really like this explanation and find this really fascinating, that the first ones are sort of dominated by what is different about the physical world and what happened to places, like in terms of the sheer layout of the planet. And then it's what culturally became the most significant and relied upon by civilization. I think that's a really cool idea. And he asks, why are they numbered back to front? Because we think 1 was the original world of the 12. Anyway, it was the great mages of 1 who first discovered the other worlds, and they did the numbering. This was a much better explanation than the one Croix had given. Christopher felt obliged to Flavian for it, so that when Flavian asked, "Now what do you think makes us call these 12 the related worlds?" Christopher felt he owed him an answer. "They all speak the same languages," he said. "Very good," said Flavian. His pale face went pink with surprise and pleasure. "You are a good pupil." "Oh, I'm absolutely brilliant," Christopher said bitterly. So things don't go great from here out, because Christopher is supposed to learn extremely basic magic here. Now, Flavian gives a kind of an explanation as to why he needs to learn this stuff, but I don't really understand it. But Christopher just keeps sort of, there's a series of steps. This is basically the equivalent of being assigned to do like a math problem and being told to show your work, but you're somebody who it like inherently just makes sense to you, and showing your work is really like difficult and makes everything more painful than just answering the question. He kept a special vague look on his face so that Flavian would not notice what he was doing, and making half the spells work without going through more than half the steps. "Oh, no," Flavian said anxiously when he did notice. "That's enchanter's magic. We'll be starting that in a couple of weeks, but you have to know basic witchcraft first. It's most important for you to know whether a witch or wizard is misusing the craft when you come to be the next Chrestomanci." Now, I want him to expand on this. Combination of things. I want him to expand on this, and I want Christopher to expand on it. I want him to ask. But Christopher just gets distracted by the fact that he's once again saying you're going to be the next Chrestomanci, without even like thinking it through. And I just want Christopher to just ask the practical question right now and just leave it. Like, obviously, whether or not Flavian assumes that you're going to be the next Chrestomanci or not, it's not like his opinion is going to be the deciding factor. So whether he thinks it, just leave it. Just don't, just ignore that part and talk about the pertinent thing, which is, you know what I mean? I just want him to get more information about this. If he's so irritated at having to do it, maybe understanding why they're acting like it's so crucial is gonna help you. But no. And then when he asks about whether the present Chrestomanci is going to die soon, it turns out he has 8 lives left, which I'm just irritated by. And when Flavian asks why he asked, and Christopher just says it was a whim, this moment just honestly kind of was so cute and terrible. Oh dear, Flavian said, worrying because he was failing to keep his pupil interested. I know. We'll go out into the gardens and study the properties of herbs. You may like that part of witchcraft better. He's trying so hard, you guys. Poor Flavian. What a precious little cinnamon roll. He just wants his student to pay attention. This is important stuff. He's doing his fucking best. He's trying to appeal to things that he would like in particular. He's trying to tailor the curriculum as best he can while still keeping all the necessary shit in there. He's just doing what he can. And this little shit, and I get it, Christopher, but still, this little shit is so ungrateful and so shitty about it. And even Christopher was in fact quite interested to hear that Cedar was part of the funeral pyre from which the Phoenix was reborn, but he was not going to let Flavian see he was. Ugh! Come on, Christopher! But this is so real though at the same time. Have you guys ever had this? Where you can see from the outside that you're being deeply unreasonable about a thing, that you know that you're only reacting this way and provoking somebody because you are irritated about an overall situation and it's not their fault, but you can't help it, that you're I've been there. And it's awful to be trapped in that state of mind, and you really have to work hard to break free of it once you see it happening. And sometimes the effort just doesn't seem like it's worth it. And I urge you all, when you notice it, try your best, because it's not fair to the other person, and you're really doing yourself a disservice almost always in the long run. But God, I really I feel for them both so much in this scene. So let's see. Oh yeah, this is when fucking Throgmorton comes out, and it turns out Throgmorton, who ran out the window, who was going to be cut up into pieces to be sold by his horrible uncle, who, for some reason, Christopher still doesn't seem to have come to terms with the fact that his uncle is a monster. He comes leaping out. He's fine, and it turns out that he's been, wreaking holy havoc on everybody. They're all super afraid of him. They've got these protective spells that they have to use when they go out and do gardening and stuff now, because it says, Gabriel's had to give all the outdoor staff special shielding spells, or they said they'd leave. It tears strips off people through ordinary spells, which just, damn, And Christopher winds up getting along quite well with Throgmorton. And it's a weird thing, because Throgmorton later on seems to be linked low-key to Christopher losing his lives. And I still don't really know about... That's one of those moments that he's not putting together real obvious shit that I feel how are you not seeing this, dude? It's as clear as the nose on your face. And then he talks about how Throgmorton's always been around, and there's a connection that I definitely did not make. So, I guess point for you, Christopher. But yeah, he becomes friends with Throgmorton, and essentially Throgmorton's his only friend. He doesn't have anybody else his own age or who really gives a shit that lives there. And Throgmorton winds up coming along with him when he explores the castle, and generally making Christopher happy because he gets to watch as people run the fuck away from Throgmorton. At one point, let's see, I'm trying to find here it is. Christopher once saw Throgmorton encounter Gabriel DeWitt coming down the pink marble stairs. Throgmorton spat and flew at Gabriel's long, thin legs, and Christopher was charmed and delighted at the speed with which those long, thin legs raced up the stairs again to get away. And it says he hated Gabriel more every time he had a lesson with him. He decided that the reason Gabriel's room always seemed so dark in spite of all its windows was because it reflected Gabriel's personality. Gabriel never laughed. He had no patience with slowness or mistakes, and he seemed to think Christopher ought to know everything he taught him at once by instinct. The trouble was, the first week when Flavian and Gabriel were teaching him about the related worlds, Christopher had known all about them from the Anywheres, and this seemed to have given Gabriel the idea that Christopher was a good learner. But after that, they went on to different kinds of magics, and Christopher just could not seem to get it through his head why witchcraft and enchanter's magic were not the same, or how wizardry differed from sorcery, and both from magician's magic. So yeah, that feels like a lot to keep track of. I sympathize with you. And throughout all of this, Throgmorton is hanging out with him, exploring with him, sneaking into his room and sleeping sometimes. At one point it says he's purring like a football rattle. And guys, I want to know what the hell that means. Pardon me while I have a sip of water. That straw sounds crazy, I'm sure, on the mic. A football rattle. Is that like, the kind of thing that you would spin on New Year's Eve in the 20s, a noisemaker? Is that what that's supposed to be? But either way, I love the fact that Throgmorton is around. Even if he's causing Christopher's deaths, it's fine. It's a fair trade-off, I think. So he's exploring the castle, and he goes up into this section, which we know from the previous book, does wind up getting turned into like a workshop and experiments and whatnot. But he is trying to see what is outside of this window because he's trying to get a sense of where in the castle he is and see if he can see the garden that has the misdirection spell on it from where he is. Because maybe even with the misdirection spell, he could still see over the wall down into it because he's so high up. Well, he steps out onto, he's like holding onto a pillar that had been part of the window and steps onto a broken slope. And then the pillar snaps in half and he just completely loses control and breaks his neck. And it turns out as time goes on that his recovery from dying does not take as long. The first time he is not allowed to actually die. The first time the spells preserve him. The second time, though, when he's killed by the cricket bat, it's like hours before he manages to wake up again. This time, it's like, I think it's almost a full day, honestly, that time. This time, it's a couple of hours, right? Like, Patricia says, I think he did die the first time. Did he? I didn't even remember that. She was doing the spells over him, his governess, and I thought she had managed to keep him from actually dying. I don't think the spells worked. Oh, shit. I really missed that then. Oh, well. It doesn't really matter. In any case, it seems like things go more quickly now. And he is like, the one comfort that he has is Throgmorton being in the room with him, but they wind up like chasing him out. And apparently Throgmorton has a really strong, distinct smell. So on that point, I can't help but sympathize. Like, it depends what that smell is. Does Throgmorton just smell like cat piss? Because that's the worst. And if it's something else, it's like, I'm not sure what. I just sort of want them to let him have his cat for comfort and just shut up about it. Like, Throgmorton might go after you, but it doesn't seem like if he's sitting with Christopher that he's really giving anybody any grief. So just let him be, right? But no. So this is when Flavian brings a bunch of books for him. And he's just trying to be nice. He's just trying To make things nice, Christopher, be nice. Just don't. Oh, wonderful. Lots of lovely work. I've been lying here itching to get on with some algebra. Flavian looked a little injured. Well, no, he said. These are things from the castle library that I thought you might like. And he went away. Oh, Flavian, you sweet, sweet little cinnamon roll. So at this point, he's like reading and he actually does start to enjoy himself. And he's like irritated at the fact that fucking Flavian was kind of right. And Throgmorton comes back and it gets him to thinking about the fact that he really should go back to Series 10 and bring the books that he owes that goddess, because he still, as far as he is concerned, has not repaid her adequately for what it turns out Throgmorton is worth. So he gets summoned to essentially the headmaster's office, Chrestomanci's office, because this dude is very irritated with the fact that he has lost another life, and as far as he is concerned, is being really careless in general. Like, he's careless with his lives. He's careless with the time of servants that have to go around, like, cleaning up after his stupid mistakes. He's careless with the structure of the castle, that, like, him going and poking around in broken areas makes it so that they have to now, like, invest all this money to fix things so that he doesn't take it upon himself to, like, go around fucking up other stuff. And meanwhile, Christopher is personally, like, doing his own whole little thing where he has figured out how to get past the spells that are keeping him from traveling to the Anywhere, because he is so feeling like just so hemmed in and claustrophobic living here that he's wishing he could get out. And then he realizes, like, oh, I could get out in the Anywheres. Why haven't I been doing that? And it turns out that there are spells meant to keep him from doing this exact thing, but they don't have the kinds of, like, alarms on them that you would expect. So he really thinks, after doing this one time, that the next morning they're going to figure out that he did it and put another spell in place to fix it and keep him from doing it again. But it seems like nobody has detected that he can do this. So this is an interesting thing. I love the way this is written. He slips out of his body and then tries to walk into the next world. It says, there, it was like walking into a sheet of thick rubber that bounced him back into the room. The castle spells again. Christopher set his teeth, turned his shoulder into the rubberiness, and pushed, and walked forward a little with each push, but quietly and gently, not to alert anyone in the castle, until after about half an hour, he had the spell stretched as thin as it would go. Then he took a pinch of it in each hand and tore it gently apart. That's so wild, and I love this so much. I love it. I love this whole, like, description of how this magic works. So, World B is the place that he winds up, which I think it's pretty clear that that is our world, and he absolutely hates it. Like, all of the machinery is just terrifying to him. He is not interested. It was also pouring rain, so he, like, gets soaked. And then he, when he's, like, at the place between, he's just really realizing how much he ignores, or how much he misses. I'm trying to remember his name. Now I can't remember his name. I keep wanting to call him Toffee. But he's, like, really alone to Croy. Thank you, Patricia. Toffee. And he is setting off to 11 because that's the one that only has the singular world and is just sort of considered off limits. And he's just wanting to break rules, kind of just for the sake of it, to prove he can to people who are trying to hem him in too much. That's all it is. And he is heading up there, and he is cold. It's wet. he's trying to climb this really like steep fucking incline, and he falls and he breaks his head. And this is like, you know, he just fell. And do you know what I thought? I thought he has to die in each world. I thought, oh, he died in our world this time first. So now he's going back to the other world and dying the same way, falling and breaking his neck. And I think that right up until the moment that he goes pitching down the stairs and breaks his neck. So, like, apparently if he breaks his neck in his own world, that's fine. That can be a singular event. But if he breaks his neck in the other worlds or does anything in the other worlds, that has to be matched up in our world, which is sort of weird and interesting. There was nothing at all wrong with him when he woke up. Christopher would have been very puzzled had he not been dreading seeing Gabriel. He gets a letter from his mother that's like, I can't believe your father sold you into slavery. Then says your uncle sends his sympathies and hopes to hear from you by next Thursday. And that is the signal that he is going to have to go and do some more smuggling, which he still hasn't figured out that's what the fuck is going on. And he goes and gets his, like, you know, sort of scolding from Christopher. Or from Gabriel, sorry. And this is when Gabriel says the Wraith is a gang of smugglers. We know they operate throughout London, but that is about all we know, for they are slippery as eels. In some way, despite all our traps and watchfulness, they smuggle in illicit magical produce by the hundredweight from all over the related worlds. They have brought in cartloads of dragon's blood, narcotic dew, magic mushrooms, eel livers from Series 2, poison balm from 6, dream juice from 9, eternal fire from 10. We set a trap in 10, which took out at least one of their operatives, but that did not stop them. I have to assume that's the hook that came swinging down, but I am still not really sure that's what it was. The only success we have had is in Series 5, where the Wraith was butchering mermaids and selling the parts in London. There, we were helped by the local police and were able to put a stop to it. Which, like, what? So obviously when Christopher shows up, whatever it is that's being smuggled is already butchered and packed up, and, you know, it's all very sort of sanitized, I guess, by the time he arrives there. But they're making it sound like the people that he's involved with are the ones that are doing the butchering of, like, mermaids. We find out there was another animal too, and I'm really curious what this is when they say we were helped by local police and put a stop to it. Was there just a local who was working with the Wraith, or is there another operative going into a trance and getting this stuff done? I would think not, because if they were able to do this kind of work in the first place, they wouldn't be so reliant on Christopher, because he can make things solid and, like, you know, pick things up and whatnot. This year, we have had reports of the most appalling weapons that the Wraith is bringing in from Series 1, each one capable of destroying the strongest enchanter, and we still cannot lay hands on the gang. You see what mischief your careless climbing could do. While we rush around the castle on your account, we could miss our one chance of catching this gang. You should learn to think of others, Christopher. I really thought, like, I just really thought this fucking conversation would be when Christopher would get it. The fact that he talks about every single thing and Christopher is not putting it together. Dude, you need to fucking hear what people are saying to you. So this is when he falls down the stairs and Gabriel is irritated. He's like, we just had this conversation. Are you kidding me? And this is when Christopher notices that Throgmorton always tends to be around. There was that time in Series 10, just before the hook hit him. So yeah, Series 10 is where the hook hit him. So I feel like that had to be part of a trap. A man had mentioned Asheth. Christopher began to be afraid he might be under a curse from Asheth. It made another very good reason for taking the goddess some more books. So at this point, he has to go to the library and write lines. He finishes, and then he discovers that this library has like a ton in it. Like, he has not been taking full advantage of what is available at all. And he starts to look through it all and finds some really rare books because of how they were imported from another world. And he thinks, all right, well, if these are super rare, it's kind of amazing the way that he thinks about this, because it makes total sense. It's just so the opposite. His feeling is, I need to pay back adequately for the cat that I took. So I will definitely give you some rare books because I'm sure they're worth more. Whereas my mind, I was like, they're trying to keep track of books, I would assume, and the ones that are the most rare, they're going to be the most worried if those disappear. So take things that are not worth as much. Because really, when it comes down to it, he is giving her stuff from other worlds. No matter what the worth is in our world, they're going to be worth a lot to her in her own world. What I'm saying is that the worth doesn't necessarily translate, but I understand his intent here. So at this point, Flavian, the sly old dog, has started to wise up a little bit. And they're doing their lesson. Christopher is, as usual, only like half engaged. And then Flavian says, "Are you interested in cricket at all?" What a question. Christopher felt his face light up even while he was answering coolly, "No, I'm only passionate about it. Why?" Guys, I just love how she has captured this fucking perverse urge to make like you don't care about shit that exists in teenagers. Oh, she's so good, because this is just so how it is. I remember. He says, "The castle plays the village on Saturday down on the village green. We thought you might like to work the scoreboard for us." "Only if someone takes me out through the gate. The spell stops me going through on my own. Otherwise, yes, like a shot." "Oh, Lord, I should have got you a pass," Flavian said. "I didn't realize you liked to go out. I go on long hikes all the time. I'll take you with me next time I go. There are all sorts of outdoor practicals we can do. Only, I think you'd better master witch sight first." Christopher saw that Flavian was trying to bribe him. Honestly, that's precious, and I love it. I love it so much that he's reducing himself to these kinds of tactics, because they work. There's a reason that people use them. I just find this really charming and endearing. He thought he would not have too much trouble conjuring fire either as soon as Flavian allowed him to try, which we find out he has a little trouble. But he could not get the hang of witch sight. It was quite simple, Flavian kept telling him. It was only making yourself see through a magical disguise to what was really there. But when Flavian put an illusion spell on his right hand and held the hand out as a lion's paw was all Christopher could see. Flavian did it over and over again. Christopher yawned and looked vague and kept seeing a lion's paw. The only good thing was that while his mind wandered, he hit on the perfect way to keep those books for the goddess dry in the place between. So, we go to chapter 13 here, and this is where I love the spell work again. He goes and checks the spell that's supposed to keep him from traveling, and the split in the spell is still there, which he really didn't expect. Very gently, not to disturb it, he tore 2 long strips off it, one wide and one narrow. To sort of revisit, he's tearing strips off of a spell. Then, with a vague shimmering piece of spell in each hand, he went back to the books and wrapped them in the wide piece. The narrow piece he used like string to tie the parcel up, leaving a loose end to tie to his belt. When he spat on the parcel, the spit rolled off it in little round balls. Good. So that's so cool that he can tear strips of something that is supposed to keep our world safe from reaching the other world, and he's using that to You know, like, that's just really wise. I like that a lot. Because, yeah, he keeps on going. Whenever he goes into that world, he doesn't have any clothing. He has to put on whatever clothing has been left. So it wouldn't, like, you know, I don't know. The thing is that if he doesn't have clothing, why is it that he's able to bring books with him? You would think he wouldn't be able to bring anything. Patricia says, LOL, he has clothes. He's in his pajamas. But doesn't he, like, at one point go through and there's just a pile of, like, clothes that barely fit? I thought that was this last time. Right before this one where he went through. That's weird. Okay, I'm misremembering then. So, okay, he can bring stuff through all the time, no problem. He puts regular clothes out there to change into. Oh, so he's just not wearing his pajamas around all the time. I gotcha. So Christopher is so sort of oversensitized to loud noises and stuff now because of living in this, like, really isolated castle, that being in series 10 actually makes him way more anxious than he used to. He keeps having to sort of take breaks and calm himself down and just recover from, like, the overstimulation before continuing along. And it's super interesting because once he goes and talks to the goddess, she's also sort of in that state of mind, except left over from a couple of days ago. And she says it was the festival 3 days ago because she's acting really listless and strange. And he's like, are you sick? Like, what's going on? And she says, you know, it's the one day in the year when I go out. After months and months, all quiet and dark. God, excuse me, guys. I don't know where that came from. After months and months, all quiet and dark here in the temple, there I am suddenly out in the sun, riding in a cart, dressed in huge, heavy clothes and hung with jewels, with my face covered with paint. Everyone shouts, and they all jump up on the cart and try to touch me. For luck, you know, and not as if I was a person. I don't think they notice I'm alive. And it goes on all day, the shouting and the sun and the hands banging at me until I'm bruised all over. It used to be exciting when I was small, but now it's too much. And she's really, like, kind of getting herself worked up. And he tries to distract her by talking to her about what's been going on with him and all of the different stuff that he has been through and done recently. And he explains how witch sight has been really difficult. And she's like, well, if you can't see it, but all he's doing is asking if you can see his hand, just tell him you can see his hand. Like, why don't you just go ahead and lie? And he's like, oh, I never even thought of that. And she's like, yeah, well, you're too honest. And she tells him, silver forces you to tell the truth. The gift of Esheth tells me. So you got into the habit of never lying, which is interesting. I kind of like that. Thank you for telling me about yourself. I think you've had a rotten life, even worse than mine. People only want either of us for what use we are to them. You for your 9 lives, and me for my goddess attributes. And both of us are caught and stuck and trapped in a life with a future all planned out by somebody else, like a long, long tunnel with no way out. And as she says this, she gets herself even more upset. And Christopher is sitting there, a little startled, because he never really thought about it in those terms. But then when she says it, he's like, that's true, though. This does feel like what I'm going through. And he tries to comfort her and be like, well, when you're older, this will be over. And she's like, I want to stop now. I want to be able to just do all the normal stuff, go to school and talk to my friends and yada, 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 which is exactly how he's been feeling. But I can't help but wonder if she gets older, if she really does get to stop, or if they kill her, because, like, that feels like something they might do, you know, forcing a human being to live like a god for a while. I don't feel like you just get to go back to being a human being after that. I just don't really think that's how that would work. So she starts to cry even more intensely until she has drawn the attention of some of the people who are keeping an eye on her outside, and he hears them coming, and he has to, you know, hurl himself out of there. and he goes into the place between, and he tries to sort of like forestall his frustration and his fears about everything by telling himself that he's going to be seeing Croix on Thursday. So he just tells Flavian, yeah, I can see your hand. He just lies. And Flavian is really happy and decides to take him on this hike that he's been promising as a reward for mastering Witch Sight. Now, I feel like not being able to actually use Witch Sight is gonna come up. I feel like that's gonna be a problem. But for right now, he's getting what he wants in the short term, and we'll see how this winds up working out. And Croix, it turns out, is there and kind of surprised that Christopher has shown up and is acting really weird and says, are you sure you want to go? You can tell me your news just as well here. What's the matter? Croix shrugged. Well, for a start, the last time I saw you, your head was bashed in. Oh, I never thanked you for getting me back here. Think nothing of it. Though I must say it was the hardest thing I've ever done in any line of work, keeping myself firm enough to bring the carriage through the interworld and heave you off here. I keep wondering why I was doing it, too. You looked pretty thoroughly dead to me. At which Christopher says, well, I've got 9 lives. And Croix, laughs at this like he's making a joke. And it's like, well, something like that, not realizing that he's being quite literal about it. And he finally says, I get paid for this, me being here and doing this. That's one thing. You're just doing this because you're trying to please your uncle, and you're gonna get hurt again. That could definitely happen. And when Christopher tries to be like, well, Uncle Ralph gave me 2 sovereigns, Croix is like, 2 sovereigns? Do you know the kind of money that he's making for himself? Again, why has Christopher not figured this out? He's literally telling him about, is it supposed to be that Christopher knows and just is not addressing it? Is that really what it is, that Christopher isn't unaware? It's just that he's not willing to engage with what this actually means. I have a really hard time imagining that Christopher would be cool with doing this just to get out of the house after having, met mermaids and liked them and then finding out they've been cut up for parts. I feel like that is not how he would react. But at the same time, I don't know. I guess I'm not really sure. He was weirdly, he was glad that Throgmorton got away and that he didn't get cut up. But it didn't seem to affect his judgment of his uncle in that moment, that his uncle was saying that's what he was going to do to Throgmorton. So, I don't know. But anyway, they head out and they are apparently getting a bunch of dragon's blood. And he can recognize what it is from the smell. It's just got this really distinctive smell. And he is in the middle of looking over stuff and thinking about how strange it is that this is what he's loading up, when Croix gives a yell and Christopher looks up and there is a fucking dragon coming at him, and the dragon burns Christopher up to a crisp. He's like a hot dog that's been left on the grill too long, and it's really kind of amazing and cinematic, and I low-key want to see this on screen. Patricia's saying, Uncle Ralph is the only person who seems to value him. He's got him on a pedestal. I doesn't want to believe that he's doing this. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's just, so you're saying that it is he's low-key aware, but he's just in denial. I guess that makes more sense than anything. And he manages to come back to himself, and Croix is like, all right, look, you just got burned to death after everything. If you come back here, I'm not coming back. And he says, I'll square your uncle, which I'm very curious what he means by that. And he bails, and Christopher is very irritated about the fact that, like, Croix is sort of leaving him. I think, this is the one friend that he has, and he just feels like he's being robbed of it because of what's his uncle's involvement, which I think he doesn't see as being fair. So the next day, he wakes up. Flavian is like, okay, we're going to go off on this hike. We're going to go quite a ways, and I'm going to teach you things on the way, and then we're going to build a fire so that we can make dinner. And he has a little trouble building the fire initially. He's super hungry and cranky that he has to build this fire before they can eat. And Christopher, it says, willed savagely, fire, fire, fire. The pile of sticks went up with a roar in a sheet of flame 10 feet high. Christopher once more heard his skin fry, and his wet oilskin crackled and burst into flame too. And this is when he's finally figuring out that this is the, like, dragon fire death. And when he wakes up, there are, Gabriel is there, Dr. Pawson is there, and it turns out that he kind of started a forest fire. And Gabriel is, like, trying to get him to put it out. He's just like, they, let's see. I will simply point out that you've caused me to be called away at the moment when we were about to lay hands on a member of the Wraith gang I told you of. If he slips through our fingers, it will be your fault, Christopher. So, was that to Croix? And he finishes it with, like, if you have one more accident, we're going to have to take some drastic measures, which I'm very curious what that looks like. Maybe taking the lives away and putting them somewhere the way that he does with Kat later. And then, I'm out of time. Shit. But then there is the cricket game, which I really appreciate that he gets to do this. He gets to play because somebody else dropped out. I am definitely suspicious of the fact that somebody else was sick and dropped out. I feel like this was, like, something that was done to give him something to do. Like, I just don't buy that this happens all the time and nobody mentioned it. I feel like they're trying to make him feel better. But I could be giving them way too much credit. Or that somebody, asked the guy to back out. Who knows? But I appreciate that there's, like, a little flicker of being happy and getting to do the things that he used to do. So the chapter ends with Christopher going out into the in-between, and he's, like, hoping Croix is there, and he isn't. So he decides that he's just going to go back to 10 and talk to the goddess for a bit because the two of them, like, understand each other. And that is the end of the chapter. Patricia says, I think so. His parents have never shown him even fake affection, so he's not remotely going to hear anything against the one person who did. And it would dye his one other friend with the same brush. Yeah, that's true. I never really thought about it as being like, well, if he's shit, then you're shit for working with him. But that's true. All right, cool. Yeah. Oh, and there's, like, a woman who's really good at cricket that he's, like, super impressed with that I low-key think he's getting a crush on. So I'm here for that also because it's just, Miss Rosalie, that's her name. So I'm kind of into that because romance isn't so much a thing in these books. And I really prefer no romance in my books most of the time. But, I would be interested to see how this works out. So I have to go. But thank you, Patricia, very much for commissioning this. I'm really enjoying this book. Hope you guys are enjoying the coverage. And I will see you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.